So, I build on servers with other people, and every so often I see someone comment on how there just isn't a color for whatever build they're working on. Now, when you think about it, that makes sense, right? We have hundreds of blocks, but a lot of them have similar colors or they're just variants of the exact same pattern. And yet, the idea that we are seriously limited by color in Minecraft building is one of the game's greatest lies. Okay, so that's a bold claim. Let me explain. But my experimenting with this stuff goes way back, so I'm going to go back to the beginning. When I started building seriously, it was 2020. What had originally started out as a nice break from school turned into an excuse for me to just never touch grass again. So I did what any self respecting student would, procrastinated all my work as much as I could afford to, and I played Minecraft all day. Oh, yeah, and then that procrastination kind of turned into a whole cave system. I may have gotten a little bit carried away that time. During that time, I started looking at some videos for inspiration. Grian and Jaracraft had each made a few different caves, and they both showcased a pretty cool technique that I instantly loved: the fog effect. For those of you who don't know, a fog effect is where you either layer stained glass and air, or two different layers of stained glass to get a fog like appearance. So I threw probably five or so of them around my build. Eventually, this gave me an interesting idea. What if I used a fog effect to make a fake sunset underground? Now, this was definitely a jump from the conventional fog effect since it would involve adding different colors and bands in such a way that it could mimic a setting sun. I'd never seen anyone else try it before, and I figured it could be a cool challenge. I didn't do it at a large scale because I figured that my attention span would just not take kindly to it. In my defense, I was on Pocket Edition, there was no world edit, so just cut me some slack. But eventually, I completed it, and it looked unlike anything else I'd ever seen in the game. Light could shine through the blocks that looked almost solid, but it made them seem even more sky-like than anything else that I could even think of. The colors were bright, and it seemed as though it was almost torn from a different world. The fact that that technique worked as well as it did blew my mind. And I did what any builder would do after finding out something like this. I never touched it again for like a year. Yeah, you may have thought that was where things actually started, but I just didn't think about it again for a while. So yeah, instead of actually messing around with stained glass anymore, I didn't really keep thinking about pursuing it. I just messed around with other blocks, built a lot more caves, and generally speaking, got better at building, but I just didn't think about it again for a pretty long time. One day, it came up again. I'd been making more fake skies and portals for a bit, and eventually, Vahan was working on making a roof and decided that she wanted to use glass to smooth out a gradient. And I thought, what if I just made a gradient with only stained glass? Now, on the surface, that one seems kind of ridiculous. There are a grand total of 16 colors in Minecraft, 17 if you're counting tinted glass. But if you layered those, effectively making a sideways fog effect, and you just put different colors on every block, maybe it could work. And let me tell you, it worked. By worked, I mean it changed the way I build completely and irrevocably. This gradient behind me is still in Minecraft, and it's also entirely in vanilla. I use some tools like World Edit just to speed up making it because, let's face it, I don't want to build all this by hand. And then I also use a debug stick to get rid of the lines from glass panes, but that's entirely possible in survival without it, even. It just won't have, like, the lines from the panes removed. Even if the solid glass gradients aren't your thing, you can use it to tint the blocks underneath it too, which smooths a lot of otherwise really annoying gradients out. And they work really similarly to any other gradients you've seen in this game, they just use colors that you make yourself. You can use them for shading just how you'd use any other gradients by placing darker colors in the shadows and lighter colors in places where light would hit it. As it turns out, lots of what doesn't exist in conventional building exists with stained glass. You can make gradients as smooth as the ones on the gradient banner pattern, and you can create your own colors instead of relying on the colors of blocks. You have no access to horizontal slabs, but the panes are like vertical slabs in every color. Every aspect of building interacts in new, weird ways. The size of the space you work with impacts the opacity, which then in turn impacts color, which can be impacted by lighting as well. You kind of get the idea. Everything is strangely interconnected, and you have to think about it all at once. But building solely with stained glass, you'll lose some shaping, but you'll gain access to more colors than anyone could think possible in Minecraft. Using just 5 layers of glass, that gets you over 1 million combinations of stained glass colors in each different layer. And each of those has the potential to make a completely different color. It's a little bit higher than the hundreds of blocks we have now, huh? Now, granted, there are limitations. Shaping's harder because you don't have slabs and stairs. Because it requires layers, it's harder to make it work in a full build with space constraints. Now, I said that was with only glass. What about if you add solid blocks like what Vahan was working on at the time? There are over 900 blocks in the game currently, but let's say, just for the sake of argument, there are 200 textures that aren't variants of the same block. That gets you, with 1 layer of glass, including tinted here, so that's 17 total, 3,400 possible combinations, each of which can have different colors. That's way higher than 900 to begin with, and that's just possible by tinting blocks that already exist. If you have a block and a texture that you like, but it's the wrong color, you can just use glass to change the color entirely. You can still have the texture show through even with that. Want to have a purple quartz pillar to go with purple? Now you can. It's that easy. Need a transition between wood and moss? Just throw some green glass at it. There you go. How do you know that this stuff will work when you're putting actual blocks down? It's largely based on color theory, to be honest. If you know how color theory and the color wheel works, it makes life much easier. If you use complementary colors of glass and blocks, you can make a much more muted color, whereas the other colors will just give the block behind it a different tint. Technically speaking, is that also what the complementary colors do? Yeah, it's just that they kind of interact differently because complementary colors are across each other on the color wheel and are kind of opposites. At the end of the day, I know that this is a really time consuming way of building, and not everyone wants to do it. It's also harder to plan a build around it because you need to make sure that there are enough layers in any one spot to get the right color and have it be somewhat less transparent. The way that the build interacts with light is, to say the least, a bit different. But with some clever planning, you can render color limitations in building almost completely meaningless. And that is why I say limitations in color are really one of the biggest lies in building. It's because at the end of the day, with enough planning and with the right techniques, they barely even exist. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more things like it, please consider leaving a like and subscribing. It would really mean a lot. And I'll make sure I also link a tutorial on how to do the basics of glass gradients above, just because it kind of helps, to be honest, to have somebody walk you through it. I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.